Hi there. If you're watching this video, it means you're either enrolled in my Political Science 150 class, or maybe you've enrolled but you're trying to decide whether you want to stay in my Political Science 150 class. And this video is one of 3 videos that's intended to introduce students to the class, the structure, and then also to me personally, so that you have a better idea about who I am, how the class is going to be structured, and whether or not it's going to be a good match for you. Because not every class and every way that a professor structures his or her class meets with a student's particular learning style. And so if my class doesn't meet with your learning style, that's not a problem. You got to find somebody who is going to work with your learning style. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is give you enough information so that you can make a wise decision. If you're in my class and you don't really have any other options, hopefully after you watch these 3 videos, you won't be disappointed. So first, the class is called the Introduction to American Government and Politics. It's Political Science 150. This is going to be an online class, but it's an asynchronous class. By the way, my name is Phil Gusson, Dr. Phil Gusson. Don't call me Dr. Phil. You can call me Phil, I'm okay with that, but not Dr. Phil. As a matter of fact, when I first got my PhD, the first students who sort of realized, oh, you're Dr. Phil, when they would say that, I would laugh, because at the beginning it was funny, but after the 1,000th time that somebody had made that joke, I was just like, no, stop, please. So no Dr. Phil, but you can call me Phil. But I know some people are uncomfortable calling either professors or older people, not old, but older people by their first name. And so if you want to refer to me as Professor Gusson, that's obviously fine with me. I'm going to have office hours. They will either be listed on the syllabus for sure, or we can also set up a Zoom appointments via Zoom meetings via appointment. You can email me at philgusson@canyons.edu, and if you use Discord, I'm also on Discord, and so you can reach me at phil_Gusson #0599. I'm not always checking my Discord, but I do sometimes, and so if that's convenient for you, you can use that. In terms of telling you a little bit about myself, before I returned to school, I was actually a plumber and a plumbing contractor for 13 years. The name of my business, once I started my own business, was GPA Plumbing. It didn't have anything to do with grade point average. It was Gusson Philip Aaron, my name, last name, first name, middle initial. So it was GPA Plumbing. And I did that for, like I say, around 13 years, and then in my late 40s, I realized that I did not want to plumb the rest of my life. It is a noble profession, and I applaud those who do that work. It's hard work. Sometimes I feel like it's harder work than what I do as a professor, but it just wasn't for me. I wasn't getting anything personally rewarding from it. And so it paid the bills, which was cool, but I wanted more than that. And so I sold my business to a friend, and I applied to UCLA, and they turned me down. Now, I probably should have realized that they were going to turn me down. I hadn't been in school for 13 years. And so they wrote a very nice letter that said, it's been a long time since you've been in school. Perhaps you should go back, take some classes, especially in statistics, and show us that you still have what it takes. What they really meant is like, we don't take plumbers. In any case, I was devastated at the moment, but decided that I needed to figure out how I was going to get to UCLA, because that's where I wanted to go. So I applied to CSUN in their graduate program, which was a very good program. Cal State Northridge is a great college, and especially depending on what department or what major you're in. So I got my bachelor's degree. I got my master's degree from CSUN. I graduated with a 4.0 grade point average. I actually presented a paper at a political science conference. And so when I reapplied to UCLA they accepted me the second time. But that's when I found out that in order to get a PhD at UCLA, I needed to get a master's degree at UCLA. So I had to get a second master's degree, and then I went on and got my PhD. So I actually have 2 master's degrees and a PhD, all in political science. Once I got my degree, I taught at UCLA for 2 years. Then I taught at Pepperdine for 2 years. Then I taught at UCLA for 2 more years, and then I was hired by College of the Canyons. So that's how I wound up at College of the Canyons. And I taught as an adjunct, a part-time professor at College of the Canyons before I left UCLA. So that's how I wound up here. That's why I'm teaching this class. That's why you're listening to me ramble on. Now, the thing is that some of the best students I had at UCLA were transfer students. And so I knew when I was coming to Cal State to College of the Canyons that there were going to be some great students here. I knew there were going to be some great students here. And so that informed much of the way I approach teaching political science. And what that means for you is it's a two-sided thing. There's some good news. The good news is you have a professor who respects you. I've already seen that transfer students were some of the best students, so I know some of you guys are great students. There's some of you who are going to struggle a little bit more than others, but I know that there are great students here. And oftentimes I feel like all I need to do is like set the bar high, and you guys will clear the bar. If you set the bar low, you guys will clear that bar too. So I already know you guys are capable of a lot, and maybe more than you realize. And so I'm going to push you. And that's the bad news. The bad news is you have an instructor who respects you. And so while I know that some of you are working, I know that some of you have families, I know that you're taking multiple classes, I also know that you're talented, and I'm going to push you. My expectations are high. It is probably the case that in some classes at College of the Canyons, students don't need to do as high quality of work as they need to do in my class to get a good grade. But I feel like if I lower my expectations, I should probably just stop teaching. It's in part because I respect you that I set the bar high. It's in part that what I saw at UCLA and at Pepperdine as well that makes me think these students are capable. Now, can I show them how capable they are? Can I help them come to understand how capable they are? And so that motivates me when I'm teaching. Now, when I first got to College of the Canyons, they said they wanted me to teach online, or at least learn how to teach online. And I really wasn't happy with that idea because from my perspective, I thought face-to-face classes are just a superior form of instruction than online classes. And I still believe that's true today. I do. But what I realized is that that was a false choice. Because for many students, the choice wasn't between taking face-to-face classes or taking all online classes. The choice was taking online classes or not taking anything at all. In part because students have jobs where their hours aren't set, so they can't commit to a Tuesday, Thursday class or a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday class. Some bosses are apparently not very cool having to give students the hours that they want so that they can attend class. And so as soon as I realized, and then some students have kids, some students are taking care of, babysitting, some students may be taking care of their parents. Everybody's got a different schedule. And so I realized the choice isn't between online, face-to-face or online, it's between online and nothing. And from that perspective, online is clearly superior to nothing. And then this all was accentuated when COVID hit, because then the only option was online. And I was really glad that I had developed my online class before COVID hit because I put a lot of effort into it. Now, my goal was to make my online class approximate the face-to-face experience as much as possible. Again, I said I believe face-to-face instruction is better than online, all things being equal. But since they're there were going to be cases where students were going to need to take online classes. I was going to do everything I could to make sure that they were as close to the face-to-face experience as possible. And that's where it's really important for you to understand how my class is structured. What I did was I recorded all my lectures on videos just like this in 10-minute increments, anywhere between 10 to 15-minute increments. Every lecture I recorded. There are over 100 videos altogether. And I decided that that's what I was going to do. Most online classes will have students watch videos of other people or have them read a lot of material. I wanted you guys to see what students in my face-to-face classes would see, and that's exactly what will happen. You will see exactly what students in my face-to-face classes, because the truth is that I cover the same material in the online classes I do in the face-to-face class. I even tell the same jokes. I mean, everything is exactly the same. And so that's what you're going to see. You're going to see what you would see if you were sitting in a classroom. Now, there won't be that dynamic of an exchange between us that we would have in a face-to-face class, but at least you'll see what the students in face-to-face classes will just have to communicate, via the discussion boards, during Zoom, office hours, and other ways that we on discussion board, I said that via email, but we'll communicate in different ways. You're also going to take the same exams, the same quizzes, the same discussion board posts. You're getting all the exact same assignments. So it really is as close as I could get to my face-to-face classes. That's how my online classes are structured. In terms of how I approach the material and political science, my professional orientation was derived pretty much from my experience at UCLA. My goal is not to convince you to think like me. I know that there are some professors who push their agenda in their classes, and I respect people doing things differently than the way I do them. But for me, that's not the way I approach it. My goal is to help you figure out what you believe. And so sometimes students are interested in whether or not, hey Phil, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? Well, the thing is, in order to do political science the way I think it should be done, I'm always balanced in the way I present my facts. I give both sides of an argument, usually, and I'll explain that in a minute. I'm balanced in the way I present the facts. I try and give both sides in as comprehensive way as possible and as a convincing way as possible. Now, every once in a while, students will try and figure out whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican. I remember in one of my classes, a student came up to me and they said, "Hey, Phil, we think you're a Republican." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "We've noticed that when you draw on the board, you use red markers more than blue markers." I was like, seriously? You guys need to focus more on the lectures. And then there was another one. This is one I taught at Moorpark College. These students stayed after class and they said, "Hey, Phil, we think we can figure out whether you're a Democrat or Republican." I said, "Okay, how?" And they said, if we offered you a Coors Light and a Miller Genuine Draft, which one would you take?" I was like, what are you guys talking about? And so it turned out that they said that if I'd taken the Coors Light, that meant I was a Republican. If I took a Miller Genuine Draft, that meant I was a Democrat. I don't know where they got that information from, but that was their theory. And so, of course, I told them both those beers suck, and I wouldn't drink either one of them, and I would go get a Blue Moon or something like that, or a 805, something else. And by the way, I wasn't joking there. I wasn't trying to be balanced. I really don't like either one of those beers. So, if at the end of the semester you're interested in what I am, what my party affiliation is, I'm happy to tell you. But hopefully, the way it usually works is by the time the class is over, you won't care, because it won't matter, because what my particular party affiliation is unimportant. What I'm trying to do is teach political science. Now, that doesn't mean that being balanced is not the same as being neutral, right? Because facts matter. I'm a political scientist. Facts matter. And so when there are not two sides to every story, there are some things that are just true or not true. So this is just true. President Bush was a legitimate winner of the 2000 presidential election. I know there are people who are fond of saying that the Supreme Court stopped the counting in Florida and they gave the election to President Bush. That's simply not true. As a matter of fact, a consortium of media outlets, after the election was over, got all of the ballots, went through all of the ballots, looked at them, examined them, and guess what? President Bush won the election in 2000, right? That's just a fact. There are people who argue that the chemical trails, what they call the chemtrails, you know, when a plane flies overhead and there's like a cloud that leaves a cloud behind, that cloud is condensation. That's all it is. It's water vapor. But there are some people who say that the trail that they leave is a chemical trail because the government is like dropping chemicals on us to keep us more docile and so we don't revolt. That is not true. That is just not true. The QAnon conspiracy. This is a conspiracy that says that Democrats, the Democratic elites, are involved in a satanic ritual and cult where they kidnap kids, they're pedophiles, and they have this whole underground network of tunnels where they use to take these kids around and do bad things. That is not true. Okay, that is just crazy, not true. President Biden was a legitimate winner of the 2020 election, right? Every single state certified the electoral votes. There were 60 court cases where allegations of fraud or misuse, like the voting irregularities, were brought before the courts. Some of them, the Biden camp won every one of them. Some of them, the lower courts agreed with the Trump campaign, but when they moved up to the next court, the higher courts disagreed. None of them were ruled in the favor of the Trump campaign. That's just fact. That's just fact. There are no microchips in the COVID vaccines, okay? Some people say that there's this idea that Bill Gates was part of this whole conspiracy, and if you take the vaccine, you get little microchips put into your arms. This is not true. So I am going to point out when things are just factually untrue. Okay, that's my job. As a political scientist, as an instructor, that's my job. Now, that doesn't mean that when I talk about things that are true or aren't true, that doesn't mean that there's no room for people to disagree. But I'm going to press people to give me facts, to give me actual facts, because the reason that I know these things are true and are not true is because I've done a tremendous amount of research on all of them. But if somebody wants to present an opposing argument, we can have a discussion. You're more than welcome to come into my Zoom office hours and we can talk about it. We can talk about it on the discussion boards. That's fine. I like having discussions as long as they're civil, as long as they're respectful. And by the way, that doesn't just involve you being respectful of me. That involves me being respectful of you as well. Okay, so this is the sort of your introduction to Phil. Hopefully that makes me seem like a nice guy, maybe a little quirky, but this is what the class is going to be like. Now, the other two videos are really important to watch, these introductory videos, so make sure you watch them. They're not as long as this one, okay? Take care, and I look forward to seeing you in class.